When the world has got you down. And
Alzheimer's sucks. It's an equal opportunity disease that chips away at everything we hold dear. And to date, there's no cure. So until there is, we continue to fight with the most powerful tool in our arsenal, love. This is Love Conquers Alls, a real and really positive podcast that takes a deep dive into everything Alzheimer's, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And now, here are your hosts, Susie Singer-Carter and me, Don Priest.
Hi, everybody. I'm Susie Singer-Carter.
And I'm Don Priest, and this is Love Conquers Alls. Hello, Susan.
It is. Hi, Donald.
What's up?
Excited.
What's happening?
I'm excited.
Are you excited?
We have a great guest today. I don't usually start off with that, but we do. And I was thinking about, I was watching our to be announced guest. Well, everyone will know because if they clicked on this, they know who it is. So, yeah, I was thinking about after watching his keynote speech last night again, just reminded me of all the stuff that I've talked about with this person before, and just reminded me of it also reminded me of our conversation that we had with another guest recently, Lizette, who talked about elopement. Remember when we talked about elopement and how which is not getting married, for those of you who don't know what that means.
Nothing to do with that, yeah.
Has nothing to do with marriage and going to Vegas and doing an Elvis-style wedding. No, it has to do with, that would be fun. Yeah, no, it's really about people, with dementia escaping their facility, which often leads to disastrous, events. So, which happened to my mom. When the first time I put her into a memory care unit, which I had no idea what it was. I didn't know, and she had gotten out and was like 3 miles away by the time they found her. She was determined to find her way home, I guess, right? And they were mortified. And do you remember they called me and said, oh, by the way, your mom was missing. They didn't call me when she was missing. They called me after they got her and said, everything's good. We're getting her hair done. She's happy, right? And I was mortified. And I was like, oh, my God, like for the grace of God, right?
Yeah, and she's behind a locked door. She's behind this security locked door with somebody sitting right there, and we couldn't figure out how to get out. So
no, I know, right? Yeah. We have to call somebody. And then I was thinking about the year that she lived with me, which was, my mom was so healthy, so physically healthy, full of life. She, living with her Alzheimer's. Here we are living in this loft. She's surrounded with people that, basically like her own little city that she could go and visit people every day. Like all the people, I don't know if you're not from Los Angeles, as a filmmaker, I've moved into a loft in Universal City, which is basically, it was like living on a little studio because everybody there worked in the industry and everybody basically didn't use their garages. It was very industrial. They were their offices or they worked, or they had some of the recording studios. Mm-hmm. My mom was in her prime. She was often running. Every morning she had a place to go. In fact, she ended up in one of our neighbors who was a big they were rock stars from Mexico. They put my mom in their music video. Like they loved her. And my mom, everybody knew my mom. Everyone knew she had Alzheimer's, but everybody didn't care. And she, the gates were open. My mom never left because she was happy. We didn't worry about her wandering off into the streets. And I lived right on a pretty busy street. I mean, there was valet parking, there was a gate, but the gate was open. My mom did not leave because she was satisfied. She was happy as she could be, right? And it made me think about our guest's philosophy and how important it is and how we have to think about this, because I'm just going to say his name because this is ridiculous. You're going to do the formal introduction, but Dr. Alan Power, he's just amazing. And besides that, he's he's just the nicest person you'll ever want to know. And I think most people that are advocating for people that are vulnerable are very nice people in general. So I think we're very lucky in that way that we get to surround ourselves with people like that. But honestly, it made me think about how I didn't even think of my mom ever saying I want to go home when she lived with me, because,
She felt
and
like
I'm
she was
proud
at
of
home.
this, she felt like she was home. So
Yeah,
that makes me feel good. It's validating, and that's what we should strive for, everyone, right?
absolutely.
So anyway, I just wanted to share that story, and I'm sure other people out there think about it. If you have a loved one, think about them when they've been the most happiest. If it doesn't resonate, what our guest is going to say to you. So, give him an illustrious, well-deserved introduction, Dawn.
It's going to be so illustrious. Are you ready? Because
I
I
am.
am. G. Allen Power, MD, is a board-certified internist, geriatrician, and Schlegel Chair in Aging and Dementia Innovation at the Schlegel U Waterloo Research Institute for Aging. A sought-after speaker around the world, Dr. Power is also a clinical associate professor of medicine at the University of Rochester, New York, a fellow of the American College of Physicians, American Society for Internal Medicine, and an international educator on transformational models for care of older adults, particularly those living with changing cognitive abilities. In addition, Dr. Power is an accomplished musician, composer, and songwriter. He is also a featured expert in our upcoming documentary, No Country for Old People. An award-winning author, Dr. Power is currently co-writing a book with Professor Jennifer Carson and Pat Sprigg on creating inclusive communities for people living with a diagnosis of dementia. We can't wait to dive in and hear more, so let's say hello to Dr. Allen Power. Hello, Dr. Allen Power. Shall we
Good
call you
morning
Al?
to both of you. Yes, please call me
call
Al.
it-
You can call,
we call
as
him
Paul
Al.
would say, you can call me Al. That's right. Yeah, it's good.
Mwah, mwah,
It's great
mwah,
to
mwah.
be here.
We're
And
so
just
happy to
listening
have you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And just listening to your opening 5 minutes, you've already touched on about 3 hours of conversation that we have. We can just tee up if you want.
Right?
We met in person back in June here in LA, and we just talked and talked and talked. And so I'm really looking forward to continuing that.
First of all, thank you for being a part of the show, but thank you for being a part of our documentary, because you're such a big part of it. And
Absolutely.
you and I have a little thing we do in the documentary that is so, it was organic. If you remember the Daughters from Hell that you shared with me,
Yeah.
and it resonated so much. And it's my mantra now. I am a daughter from hell, and
Yeah.
we are powerful. So I love you for that, for many reasons, but
Oh, yeah.
one of those
That
is
was
that.
something I got from my colleague, Dr. Bill Thomas, who was talking about changing long-term care in general. He said it's going to take Daughters from Hell to do that, and I think he's right.
Yeah.
And whenever you do marketing in long-term care, the key marketing demographic is sort of the middle generation women, because they tend to be the ones that take elder care on mainly as their mantle when parents age.
It's so true. It's so true. No shade on men, because there are a lot of great male caregivers who are just
Yeah.
lovely. We've met so many on our show. So, like you, Al, you're a voice. You're a voice in our community. So, and who knew how? I mean, I knew you were beloved, but we both are part of an international organization called Open the Door. And boy, are you revered. You are
That's nice to hear.
one revered man, and as you should be. Well, let's jump
Well,
into
they're
it.
doing,
So,
they,
what?
yeah,
Go
they're
on.
doing great things in Australia, and I'm fortunate to be going back there in March of next year. So we'll be doing a special session with the folks at Community Homes Australia.
That's fantastic. Yeah, yeah. You're all over, and that's so important. So, just a little background for people that don't know you. I know you're geriatrician, but we're to our dying breed, y'all, because it's just not it's not as respected or uh, um, awarded like it should be, acknowledged, because it's such an important. We have pediatricians out our bazoos, right? But we don't have on the other end of the spectrum and we need more of you. So you started there, and then what put you into the dementia realm?
It was really my work as a geriatrician. I started out just as a GP in private practice and got lured into working in long-term care and got a job at a very large long-term care community. First one for 8 years and then moving to a second one for almost 14 years. And during that time, of course, even though I had done it in private practice, I was much more commonly caring for people living with a diagnosis of dementia. And particularly in more institutional, traditional long-term care settings. Good people, smart doctors, smart nurses, people trying to do their best, but in a system that really did not support the well-being of people living with dementia. And in the realm where all of the new generation of antipsychotic drugs were coming out, and they were just being used all the time. For any kind of upset or any kind of change in a person's mood or their words or actions. And it just never seemed right to me because I could see the sedation, I could see the other side effects of the medication. And every once in a while we would come up with something that would actually solve a person's distress that didn't have to do with a pill. And I, whenever that happened, I would say, well, how many other people are there that also, if we just were smart enough, we could find those solutions and not give them these pills. And along about that time in the late 90s, I mentioned Dr. Bill Thomas is when I became aware of the movement called the Eden Alternative, which was one of the early movements to transform aging, first in nursing homes, but really anywhere where people live. And by following the system that he and his wife Jude put together and learning how you could take a system that has been kind of accepted as what it is and say, no, it can be different. And to go through some of the ways you can transform a system, as I began to be challenged more by people who frankly thought I was underprescribing because I would make people sit down and have conversations, not just give pills automatically, I thought, well, how can I take the same kind of transformative thinking? How can I apply it to a condition like dementia? How can I start to see things differently? Because I realized when I was confronted with these challenges that I had not really come up with the words well enough to explain what was wrong and what to do differently. I hadn't thought that through. So that now we've moved forward now to the mid-2000s, and around 2007, I started working on my first book about that. I'd written a paper, sent it to the big geriatric journal. They liked it, but it wasn't evidence-based, and so they didn't print it. And so one of my mentors at the university, Dr. Bill Hall, said, well, it's hard to publish things these days that aren't primary research. Why don't you write a book? And that was 3 years of me trying to figure it out on weekends when I had free time in between my practicing, and just putting it together. And that's when the first book came out. And that was around the same time antipsychotics were being exposed for all their dangers and ineffectiveness. And that kind of launched another career for me. So for the past nearly 15 years now, I've just been traveling and speaking and working on refining these ideas more and more.
Amazing. Because as you know, we've talked about this, and some of the people that listen to us know my mom was a victim of Depakote, and I didn't even know she was on it. And my mom was not, particularly hard to deal with at all. They started giving it to her when she first moved into her memory care, because it probably was easier, but I didn't know she was on Depakote. All I knew is suddenly my mom, who was walking 5 miles a day, is no longer walking. She's in a wheelchair. She's incontinent. And, and she was just going downhill. And I thought it was just the progression of Alzheimer's, but indeed her GP, after she had a checkup, called me and said, your mom's on this drug. It's a black label drug for people, with Alzheimer's and dementia. It's called Depakote. And do you want me to order it to, take it off? And I said, oh my God, yeah, nobody asked me. I didn't know. So, it's crazy.
I think a lot of us didn't know. And I will tell you, back around the time shortly before I was writing the book, that was the kind of thing where when someone discovered someone who was having those side effects, it was reportable. They were just reporting the first cases in medical journals, and I had a
Wow.
couple myself. And in my first book, I told some what I called awakening stories of people who were taken off their medications and all of a sudden began to think and do things that we didn't think they were capable of doing. And even though
Exactly.
antipsychotics feature in that story, the Depakote, which is actually an anti-seizure medication that's used this way, had some of the most powerful stories in my book because it was causing amazing effects in people who did not appear sedated, who had normal blood tests, who didn't appear to be having side effects from the medication, and yet when the medication was stopped, they had amazing transformations.
Yeah.
So it's and that's part of the problem is when we say that these drugs are sedating, people say, oh, they're not sedated, but they don't realize what's happening in the brain isn't always visible. It's not always falling asleep in your plate of spaghetti, and bring
Exactly,
the
'cause
remake
my
of
mom never
Clockwork
walked
Orange
again.
back.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's like,
it's not being able to walk. It's becoming incontinent. All those
Yeah.
things.
which
that-
changes
And
the quality of your life.
And it's the big self-fulfilling prophecy because we expect people with dementia to decline. When they get worse, we say, well, it's their dementia, of course.
This, you guys,
That's what we would
this.
expect.
I heard this ad nauseum. I heard that anytime my mom was being neglected, they go, and something would happen, they would say,
Yeah.
well, that's part of the disease. That's part of the
Yeah.
disease. And if you don't know
It's just
better,
the
you're like, oh, well,
progression,
maybe it
yeah.
is. It's
Yeah.
part of the disease. So I guess all those horrible things like, UTIs and sepsis and, pressure sores, that's what happens. But it doesn't. It doesn't have to be that way.
Elopement.
Elopement. Yeah, elopement.
Yes.
Right.
I just want to tell a funny story. In my first nursing home job, we also worked at an assisted living place that was adjacent. We actually had an elopement where two widowed residents struck up a relationship and became quite close. But because they weren't married, other residents would gossip about them and talk about them and judge them, and so they actually discharged themselves from the home. Went off in the community. They got married and moved back in a year later as a married couple. So I say I've had one episode of elopement in my career, true elopement.
That's so great. I love that. That's
so
a happy
many ways.
story.
But getting
happy
back to your
story.
comment, there's one thing I want to say because I think it's gonna feed into so much of what we talk about. When you talk about what's expected with people with dementia, one of the biggest things I do, which challenges most of the conventional thinking around dementia, whether it be doctors, researchers, the media, the Alzheimer's advocacy organizations, is this idea that what people are expressing are what they call behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia. That people do the things they do because they have brain disease, and the brain disease is somehow causing this. And this is a big thing I push back against. And in the approach I have, one of the reasons it works, or when it works, it's because you are willing to set that framework aside and say that is not correct. There is definitely an effect of dementia. It definitely it modulates your response in a given situation, but the brain disease is not the cause of the behavior. And if we can get past that one bit of thinking, it opens us up to all kinds of possibilities, which is kind of where I've gone in the past.
I love
15
it.
years with this.
I love it. I did that. There's two things I want to say about that. First, put a pin in this. I want to know, because you started to go down this before, about I want to know what the current model is that is not working in our homes.
Yeah.
And then I think that's a great jumping off point. Let's start with what the model is now and how it doesn't work, because I think that then we can jump up and say what works, and
When we talk about transforming systems of care, we talk about three basic aspects of transformation. There's the sort of personal philosophical transformation, changing how we see things. The second is physical transformation, so changing the design, the built environment that the person is living in, that we work in. And the third one is operational transformation, transforming how systems work. And they're all important. What I really work on, and what I just talked about with reframing how we see these so-called behaviors, is part of the philosophical thing. Rethinking dementia, as I often say, changing how we see the condition, changing how we see people, seeing the whole person, changing our understanding of what it means. For a lot of it, for me, it's viewing dementia through the lens of disability rather than just fatal disease. because I think a lot of the distress we see is because people are in a system that doesn't accommodate their changing needs. I was just participating in a LinkedIn discussion about this phenomenon called sundowning. And sundowning is so much caused by us because we force people with changing brains to fit into our rhythms of rest, of activity, to think in certain ways at certain times that can be fatiguing and exhausting. And we've all been to those all-day seminars where we're forced to sit all day, and we start to get a bit restless ourselves when we have to conform to other people's ideas. So that's kind of a concept. And that feeds into that third part, the operational. And the operational, to me, is really the key. I can get people to think differently, but if they go into a rigid system of care, then the problem is that they just give up because the system, doesn't enable them to think differently and act differently. And so my seminars, unlike a lot of seminars, not only teach about Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia in a different way and give people tools, but they also talk about how do you break down and transform the system of care. Because if you don't do that hand in hand with changing your thinking, then you're not going to get anywhere. And the built environment's important too. It's very important. But I think the other two, you really have to get a handle around those because unfortunately, when you think about things like design, when you think about things like technology, your decisions about those are going to be affected by how you see dementia and how you see people with dementia. So are you creating an intensive care unit or a high technology prison, or are you creating an enabling environment? And so you can't really make those decisions until you've changed your thinking about what dementia is and about what people with dementia need.
I love that. And I don't know, tell me what you think about my metaphor or my barometer for how I look at people with a debilitating disease that will get worse. But I do it as a mother. I watch my daughters grow, right? And when they're babies and they don't have their language and they don't have their mobility, we give them grace to listen with other kinds of listening, right? Cues. Are they hungry? Are they tired? Are they upset? Are they in pain? And we don't, for the most part, most of us that love children, we don't get angry. We don't say, well, she's crying, let's just give her a drug and let her shut up. We say something's wrong. There's a reason why she's crying. Right? And so when you don't have words, that's how you show communication. We do it with our pets. We listen, we watch. Is there something wrong? Are you happy? We can tell. We don't need words. And you taught me that with one of our first interviews, when the nurse when my mom was admitted into the hospital, and I called and said, could we do a FaceTime so she could just see me? And she's like, honey, she doesn't talk. And I was like, that is the example of not understanding, right? Anyway, so, I mean, I think that's good...
One of the most basic things we need to do to support people well is to become experts in communication. And communication is two ways. So it's communicating information, but it's also listening, understanding information that may be presented in a nonverbal way or through symbolic language or through emotional memories rather than factual memories. All those things are part of communication. And I agree with that 100%. And I have also used those metaphors. The only place where I get a little nervous, because people with dementia are often stigmatized as not being there, as being less than a person. And so the only place where I shy away from the metaphors a little bit is anything that leads us to infantilize people with dementia in our minds by comparing them to children or dehumanize them. That's where it gets a little tricky. But there are parallels. There absolutely are parallels. If we can learn to use other ways of interpreting people who don't speak our language. It could even be an adult person who's from another country, and you're communicating in two different languages. But as the travel guru Rick Steves says, all you need in a country is about 5 words and lots of hand symbols, and you can communicate almost everything you need to do. So you don't have to have the verbal language to understand people. And the other important part of that. The other important part, which is an operational thing, is proximity. So having the same people care for the same people and not rotating staff all the time. Because the people I've worked with, huge challenge. But the people I've worked with who are consistently assigned They know people's needs beyond words. They can tell me when
course.
somebody needs something, even though they haven't said anything. They can tell me when someone's coming down with a serious illness before there are any physical signs that might bring a nurse into the room. Prevent
they
a
know their base.
hospitalization. Yeah, that's right.
They know their base. It's like me.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, it's like me taking Don had to go to the emergency for his back a couple weeks ago, and they gave him a shot in one of his tushes on the whatever, and all of a sudden he was getting clammy, and the nurse goes, "Oh, you're getting clammy." I go, "He's a fainter." I could tell them that, and they went, "Okay, got it." Went right into it because I know Don, right?
Yep.
But if and that's the thing, when you know somebody and you have proximity, like you said, that's very important to know that. And she was like, got it, and put him down on the chair. Everything was good.
And Susie,
In my
you
early
always
years,
with your
I'm
mother,
sorry, go ahead,
yeah.
John.
I was going to say with Susie with her mother, because her mother could not communicate anymore verbally.
Yeah.
She would always see, even though her daughters knew their grandmother very well, I knew her very well, very, very well. But Susie could always, she had that unspoken language that she knew when something was wrong, if something that none of the staff could, and that takes a lot. I mean, to have somebody, a staff person there that's so, who's there all the time and really gets to know them, because they don't have time, under our current system to get to know them. That's a
whole nother top. That's a whole nother bag of worms right there.
but they're so intertwined though, and you can't improve one without the other. That's why I say it's like a three-legged stool. I had a story about that early in my nursing home working career. There was a woman who lived with Alzheimer's who had no verbalization. She could walk around and she could smile and she could give people hugs, but there were never any words for years. And she started at one point grinding her teeth. And it was a really loud, and she would do it sometimes and she would not do it other times. And it was so loud, it was annoying to listen to. It felt like it must be painful. We did everything. We checked blood tests. We checked for a urine test. We had sent her to the dentist to look at her teeth. Nothing at all. But her nursing assistant, who was consistently assigned to her, after a few weeks of this on and off, came to me and she said, "Dr. Power, I noticed something. Whenever Millie is grinding her teeth, seems to be a day when she's a little bit constipated." So we gave her a stool softener and it went away. Now, there's nothing in my medical degree that helped me figure that out. It was the proximity of the assistant to her and the constantly getting to know her, understanding the associations that I couldn't see, stopping in there periodically, that made the difference. And that's why, once again, it's not so much a matter of degrees, medical degrees or postgraduate degrees. It's having the right perspective and being close to the person, developing that meaningful relationship that gives you answers. And that's why the system has to favor that.
And it's kind of common sense, which just blows my mind, because can you imagine if your child went to school and had a different teacher every day? I mean, and that teacher didn't know that student, like that's their strengths, that's their weaknesses, all those things. I mean, it wouldn't be very successful, right? And it would also be very jarring. And I think we know that with other demographics, but because of, as you say, ageism and ableism, it's just, this particular demographic is so devalued and misunderstood.
And it's over-medicalization of the person and the condition takes away our critical thinking skills. As you say, we just write it off. That's the dementia. We don't stop to think critically about, well, why is that person doing that? Why did your mom try to leave a locked place? Maybe it was because it was a locked place. And we have already found studies and working on a new book that show that locked doors actually are a primary cause of distress. The feeling of forced confinement actually makes people want to leave. And opening the door doesn't cause a mad dash. In most cases, people look around, they're content that they're no longer trapped, and they're okay with that. And so, once again, our thinking, our logic around these things is kind of broken by our view of dementia. And that's why that's always the first step, is to broaden our thinking about the whole situation.
We'll be right back.
I'm Peter, owner of Peter's Fan Photography, and I want to talk to you about something important: preserving memories. Time moves quickly, and before we know it, those we love may no longer be with us. For the last few years, I've taken complimentary professional headshots of seniors in a local retirement home, helping families capture the essence and personality of their loved ones through beautiful photos. I've seen firsthand how meaningful these images can be. When I photographed my own parents, I realized how powerful it is to have these lasting memories. Photos that capture smiles, stories, and the unique spirit of the people we care about most. If your parents or loved ones are still with you, don't wait. These images can bring comfort and joy for years to come, whether it's for remembering silly moments or honoring family history. My message is simple. Get photos of your loved ones while you can. Hire a local photographer, use your camera, cell phone, whatever it takes. Just do it now. For more information, visit peterisfanphotography.com.
I think that comes to what you talk about, the risk management, right? So,
Yeah.
and I think that is just so valuable to tell everybody about, because it makes so much sense. And when you would explain it, so please explain it, because it does make so much sense. Yeah. But can I just say, here's my mom when she first went into, I just wanted to say this, when my mom first went into memory care and they locked the door, and here's my mom with her pocketbook, right? She doesn't know. She's like, why is the door locked? Excuse me, the door is locked and I can't get out, because she doesn't understand that why it's locked. And I can tell her all day long, Mommy, you have Alzheimer's, which I tried to be very obvious, very honest with her. I would be infuriated if someone locked me in a room.
Yeah. While I've been visiting here in California, I've actually been working on the risk chapter of our new book. And so I've been writing and thinking about this. So I'll try to encapsulate just a few points from what is already up to 7,000 words right now, pre-editing. But anyway, first of all, the rethinking dementia part. What is normal and what isn't normal? And I remind people that walking and going through a doorway is normal behavior. That's not a dementia-related behavior. We do it every day. What's abnormal is locking the door and telling people they can't leave. We're the abnormal ones, not the person with dementia. So first of all, we have to think about, we've created this artificial environment, and we're blaming them for not being happy with the environment we forced them into. As far as risk goes, there's two sides to risk. There's upside and downside. Risk is just the chance that something will turn out differently than what you think is going to happen. So if Susie is living in memory care and she gets up and walks on her own, what's the chance she could fall? That's the downside. But also, what's the chance that your strength and balance might increase? That's the upside. Or if you go outside, yes, you could step into the road, but you could also get some sunshine, some fresh air, eat better, sleep better, be healthier, be happier. So you can never look at one side or the other. Every decision we decide to do carries some upside benefit and some downside risk. But also everything we decide not to do carries some benefit and some risk. And the amount of each depends on the decision and depends on how you go about it. So really the chapter will talk a lot about looking at both upsides and downsides and how we can maximize the upside, minimize the downside. There's no risk-free environment. There's nothing that's 100% risk-free. And we have to accept that, and we have to say, how can we improve quality of life with a reasonable assumption of risk? And that part of that, involves knowing the person, knowing their values, because some of us like skydiving, and people like me wouldn't jump out of a plane unless it was going down in flames, So we all view risk, we view risk differently, and we have to understand, we have to individualize each person's needs. So there's a lot about that, but I also talk about the risks that we didn't expect. And, we had the perfect example that everybody knows about, and that is COVID. And when you just looked at COVID from the risk benefit of infection control, then it was obvious. Lock the doors, keep families out, put people in their rooms for 14 days, wear gowns, gloves, masks. That makes sense from an infection control standpoint. But many, many thousands of people got sick and died because of isolation, because they were medicated, because they couldn't sit in their rooms for 14 days, because they were missing their routine dental and other medical checkups, because they couldn't socialize, they couldn't see their families, they were lonely. And so there are other aspects of risk that are just beyond the certain, what if we do this, what if we don't? And one of the things that happens is when you lock the door, people get upset. There's an old study from 30 years ago, we quote, that shows that the majority of episodes of distress happened during the time when they locked the door and did no other intervention. So the locked door was causing the majority of distress. And we know that many people who live in memory care are getting antipsychotics, which are dangerous, which kill people. And so we can say that we are actually saying we're keeping people safe by locking the door, but then we're giving them a drug that is known to be one of the most dangerous drugs we prescribe for people with dementia, because the locked door is making them upset. So have we made them safe? Have we really kept them safe? And you talked about how your mother didn't feel right. Part of it is if we don't feel like the place we are in is where we belong, then we're going to try to escape. So part of it's a locked door, but we'll also talk a little about how do we create well-being? How do we create the feeling of home in a place that may not be your house? How do we supply those needs that don't make you want to escape and look for them somewhere else? And so a lot of it is about how we fulfill those various aspects of well-being for people so that they don't feel the need to escape. So there's a lot in that chapter, needless to say. It's not just a matter of opening the door and walking away.
Yeah. I think that comes into the position like, okay, I'm going to play our world now for the people who had somebody at home who didn't lock the door and they wandered, and now they're locking the door because of that, not taking it all without this knowledge of how you can make your home so they don't want to walk out. So what do you say? It's like they say, wait, I didn't lock it, and they wandered away. I can't have them wandering away. You know what do you say to them?
Yeah, and that does happen. I mean, we interviewed my good friend Joanna Fix, who lives in Colorado. She actually ran for the Mrs. Colorado pageant, and I think she won as a person living with Alzheimer's because she wanted to erase the stigma.
I love that.
She went out once. In the snow, and got a little disoriented. But she saw the mailbox, saw the number, and knew that she had to go back in there. So those things do happen, and so it's a combination, first of all, of meeting needs, of giving the right cueing. That doesn't give you a 100% guarantee. People won't try to leave. But rather than lock the door, how do you create safeguards? How do you create enabling technology? How do you meet the needs that even family members don't always know how to meet because they're taught by the doctors and others to focus on the disease and not on well-being? So they might do for a person, take away their autonomy, take away their sense of meaning just by very kindly and lovingly taking over for them. Sometimes people leave the house because it's a crisis. They feel like, I need to go somewhere where I have some control over my life. So just giving people some of this instruction can help them to learn how to relate to their loved one in a way that doesn't cause a crisis too. But I want to share one quote. I have some really brilliant friends, and one of my colleagues who's just a wonderful friend and a brilliant friend who I did a fellowship with a decade ago, Dr. Emmy Kiyota, who's an environmental gerontologist. And she talks a lot about the built environment and dementia and about design for aging. And she said something brilliant at a conference a couple of years ago. She said, home can be defined as a place you come back to. And if you're never allowed to leave a place, it is never going to feel like your home. And I thought, what a great concept. That, home is a place you leave and come back to. And so the places that see somebody leave and go outside with them for a while, and if they say we're looking for home, go out and say, well, let's go look, and walk out for a while and talk. Eventually, the person will be satisfied that there's a place over there that is giving them what they need, that has given them the freedom to explore a bit, and will often say, well, let's go back inside, and they'll be all right. Because home is so much, you talked about that at the beginning, it's so much a metaphorical thing, not 25 Maple Street with the green shutters, It is security, it's comfort, it's a sense of belonging, it's control over your life. It's maybe loved ones. It's people that you feel you have a relationship with. And once again, we get the consistent staffing, small households, people that get to know each other. That creates some of the attributes of home by creating familiarity, belonging. So even though it's not your house, you can do that in long-term care, and you can make a place be comfortable enough that people will feel okay there and not feel like they have to run away.
Agreed. Do you think, I have my opinions on this, obviously, but I think a lot of the risk management that is put into place in our facilities are financially driven and I think that, because you mentioned a story in your keynote about a woman who was visiting a place potentially for herself and said, oh, that courtyard's beautiful, and the door was locked, and she said, they said, oh, that's not for the residents. And she said, why? It's beautiful. It looks safe to me. It's just a nice little courtyard. It reminded me exactly of a place that where my mom's living. I could picture it. And they said, oh, well, somebody went out there and fell. Now no one's allowed out there, which is just bizarre. But it feels like that's a financially driven risk management move. Am I wrong?
It is. And that's the perfect example of how critical thinking gets destroyed. That was my good friend and colleague Karen Stobie who told that story. And Karen had the brilliant answer when the woman says somebody fell and got hurt. She said, "Tell me, has anyone ever fallen indoors and gotten hurt before?" So the idea is, if someone falls in their bedroom, do we say you can never be in your bedroom again? Or if they fall in the dining room, can you never eat again? So this idea that outside is some horrible place, even though it was a beautifully designed, safe courtyard. So once again, we're not applying critical thinking. And I think there are some drivers. The regulators are certainly a driver, and they give providers, to be fair, an impossible task. They tell them to respect our residents' rights as citizens, and they say keep them safe at all times. But one of our rights is to accept risk. And so we're stuck in a catch-22 there. The other big one comes from lawyers who are willing to sue for these things. Another big one comes from the media. If somebody gets out, like your mom did, that will make the newspapers. And yet the thousands of people who are harmed by antipsychotics because the door is locked never get written up in the media. Why aren't we talking about those as fervently as we talk about the people that get out and
well, we will be in No Country for Old People.
Yeah. And then lastly, society too. I think often family members have unrealistic expectations. People move to long-term care because they have risky situations, and long-term care is meant to help that, but there are no guarantees. People have conditions like dementia. They are at the end of their life. You can't expect that someone is going to go there and they'll never fall and they'll never get sick, and they may never try to leave because that's life, you know. And I was just writing about this the other day. It's interesting to me that people, we say in long-term care, we're going to give great nursing care and great medical care. And we know people are going to get sick. We know they're going to die. And yet we're not afraid to say we're going to do our best, even though we know that people are human. Why can't we say that with dementia and with locked doors? We're going to do our best. And we know people are human, but we're going to do our best. And why can't acceptance of risk be part of an advance directive? If I don't want a ventilator, can I also say I don't want a locked door and I'm willing to accept the risk of that? Why aren't we, why aren't we talking about that?
But we should, because by law it's a human right. There is a human right, though, and I think that we have that, and we don't exercise it. I have a quote for you, Al, to use for your chapter. Okay, here, and I'm going to bring it into popular. Here, this is the popular culture. I'm going to talk to you about the song "Take on Me" by Aha. It's one of my favorite lines in that song, where it goes, "It's no better to be safe or sorry. Either one is not better than the other." And I love that, because it applies to love, it applies to risk, it applies to everything in life. Either one is not better than the other.
I will try that, but I'm going to warn you. When I wrote my second book, I quoted a lot of people in a lot of places, and of course I quoted music, all this stuff. The only place where I had to pay any royalties, and I had to pay a lot, was for 2 lines of Beatles songs. I had to pay hundreds of dollars.
Forget about it, yeah.
Maybe Aha will be cheaper, we'll see.
But isn't that
or
maybe
great? Maybe they'll
that.
be fair use, I don't know.
I love it though. Anyway.
It's a great, and that is the catch-22, and the idea is people want perfection. There is no perfection in life. To come out to California, we had to get in a car and go to the airport. We had to get on a plane and fly here. To go to the beach, I had to sit in the sun. I had to go in the waves. There could have been a riptide. Lots of things could happen. But I am balancing those risks with the potential for benefit and saying which one is greater. And so what we have to do is we have to make the potential for benefit greater than the potential for risk. And that's what our book is all about, is how to maximize the upside by going through these, what we call practical pathways to inclusion. So it's not just about opening the door. It's about what does an organization do to prepare and to create the best possible environment for people to be happy and to be able to get outside in some sort of a relatively safe way. And that may involve technology. It may be GPS type things. We're not going to talk about specific technology because it'll all be obsolete by the time the book comes out. But we'll talk about the principles behind choosing technology so that people can then take that, look at whatever products are out there 5 years from now or whenever they happen to read this and then know how to choose wisely.
And this is the most difficult time because you don't have huge track records of this work. You have some track records. So when a family goes into a facility, if family goes to a facility and says, okay, but this we don't lock. There is no lock here. And wait a minute. What happens if they do walk through that door? Are there safeguards or anything in place that say, don't? It's okay. If they walk past that door.
Jennifer and I started this book, and then we brought Pat Sprigg on as the third author. Pat was the CEO of Carol Woods Retirement Community in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, for 30 years. They are on dozens and dozens of rolling wooded acres. They have a pond, and there are no locks and there are no gates. And they have people with dementia and people without dementia. And she was the CEO for 30 years, and they continue along these ways. So she is bringing a lot of the practical aspect of how do you deal with these things. And so part of it is the all hands on deck approach, because they are a community. Everybody knows who the people at risk are. If somebody sees Mary Smith walking out the door, it could be somebody working in housekeeping, it could be a receptionist. People know who to watch out for and what to do if they see somebody, how to accompany them or how to get somebody who can accompany them to find out what they need. So once again, it's about, it takes a village, as they say. It really does to do this. And she has an amazing history, and we also interview several people in the U.S. and Canada who have successfully unlocked their doors and who tell their stories. They tell their stories of the failures, and what they learned from it.
Sure.
They tell how the struggles, but they also tell the great success and how it improved people's lives to do so. So we'll have plenty of those stories. And I know memory care is what people are looking
You're
for.
right.
Yeah. It's, people market memory care, but if you look at long-term care and assisted living in the United States, and I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but a large majority of people with dementia in those two types of communities are living in integrated, unlocked parts. So we have selected people who live in memory care, and yet the majority of people with dementia do not live in locked memory care. And so if they can do that, let's figure out how the rest of them are doing it. And even if I go into a memory care place, the majority I've been to, there might be 30 people living there, and there might be people who you'd have to worry about if the door was unlocked, but they're usually just a few. You might have 30 people in there, and maybe 4 or 5 of them at most would actually get into trouble if the door were open. But we're locking all 30 of them up instead of care planning and individualizing a program for those 5 people. And that's where the system is important, because rigid systems create a one-size-fits-all type of approach.
Exactly.
And one-size-fits-all fits nobody. That's about
it. Doesn't work in any situation. It doesn't work in education. It doesn't work in medical. It doesn't work in anything. If it did, there'd be one size clothing, right? I mean, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I want to say that when I was under 2 years old, because we moved from this house that I'm thinking of, I was 18 months, and I walked really early. Can you imagine that? I walked I think my mom said I was like 7 months old. I would climb out of my crib, and I was out the door. I wanted to go places. Knowing
you now, I guess I can believe that.
Right? And so my mom,
you're a mover.
I opened the door. My mom said that she couldn't keep it locked. The neighbors all knew me. I went to the neighbor next door because she had teenage kids and she made breakfast early. So I was going to go get pancakes. So I come over there. I'd take my diaper off. And they call my mom and go, Susie's over here. She needs a diaper, and we're giving her breakfast, right? I mean, and it was the community, because that was who Susie was. I'm not saying it was the safest thing my mom did, but I'm just saying, I was a happy little girl.
And let's go back hundreds of years. Neurodiversity, including dementia, was kind of an accepted part of society. You had, Tom sitting over there in the corner, and that's who Tom is. We didn't lock him away. At some point, and you can read Michel Foucault, I suppose, to understand all this, at some point we started locking people away. We started creating systems of confinement for people that were not normal. That were a lot like our prison systems. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But this is about accepting diversity in society. And once again, if you look at dementia as a cognitive disability through that lens, we know there's disease there, but every disability is caused by a disease, an injury, a condition of birth. So why can't you say, yes, dementia is a disease that does involve disease of the brain or injuries, but it also can be viewed through the social model of disability lens. And I often use the metaphor, if we had a person in a wheelchair who had a flight of stairs and no ramp, we wouldn't ask them to use the stairs, but we ask people with changing brains to conform to our systems, or we lock them if they can't. And if the person tried to use the stairs and got upset, we would never say that his anger is a symptom of his paralyzed legs. and yet we say that the anger of a person with dementia is a symptom of dementia. And so
Oh my
once
God,
again,
so
you know,
true.
my greatest
And
mentor, the late Richard Taylor, who lived with Alzheimer's, and the first time I met him in person, you know, this keynote statement he made that stuck with me is, "I'm not dying of a fatal disease, I'm living with a chronic disability." And those two shifts, from dying to living, disease to disability, changed my world when I heard him say that.
Amazing. And isn't it like we put so much stock in memory, like remembering. We do it with our friends and family. We say, well, I told you that. Don't you remember? Oh my God, you have no memory. Like, what's wrong with you? You know, to someone who doesn't have a cognitive disease. We put so much, stock in it as if it makes you smarter or better or whatever. And it's like, I say memories are so yesterday because who cares? Right? I mean, at some point, it doesn't really matter. Like, I learned from one of my other mentors, which is, Judy Cornish, for the Dawn Method, who taught me when as my mom was progressing, instead of making my mom have to think about who she was seeing when I walked in the door, I let her know. Hi, Mommy, it's your favorite daughter. I'm here. Well, I'm your only daughter, but I'm still your favorite daughter. It's Susie. So she wouldn't have to think about it and feel embarrassed. And she always was so great. She'd be so happy to see me. So, and that was a game changer for me.
And Karen Stobie, who I mentioned, her original career is an improv comedian. So using improvisation skills, the yes and approach to things. And another person, if you haven't had her on yet, Ann Basting, a MacArthur Fellow, she wrote a book called Forget Memory, and talking about exploring creativity. And she has a whole website called Time Slips, where she shows different ways to engage people with very poor, semantic memory in creative endeavors, and how you can engage people to do things that you might not have expected. And so there are a lot of people who are Pia Cantos. I just saw come up on LinkedIn using dance and theater, and she and Sherry Dupuy and other people up in Ontario, where we're part-time, are engaging creativity for people with dementia. There's so many different approaches, and when you just look at dementia as a narrow, can you spell the word world backwards? Do you know what day it is? Then all of a sudden you start seeing less of a human being, and you expect less, and there's another self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't provide an environment where the person can thrive, and they don't, and you say, well, they had dementia. Right. What else can
and what's more important than right now? What is more important than right this moment? And making this moment as good as it can be. Yeah.
People with dementia do a couple things better than we do. One of the things they do better than we do is we live in the moment. We pay a lot of money for mindfulness training and yoga and qigong and all the things that we do, and yet a person with dementia can be there in the moment. And if we can learn to be in the moment, we can get things from them in conversation or in interactions that we wouldn't get if we're just focused on our tasks. And that's another thing I teach often.
I say that spend time with someone with dementia, and they are to be your teacher for Zen, because they can only live in the moment. And that's so beautiful. That's all that matters, really, at the end of the day. I mean, it's just so important, and it's actually such a beautiful way to view life. I learned so much from my mom through this journey. I think anybody would if you just slow down and watch.
They're our best teachers. People with dementia are our best teachers in how to care. And someone said to me once, well, why bother if they're not going to remember this? Why bother to do this engagement?
My brother said that.
And I say, imagine, go back to your high school years. Imagine there was a Saturday night when you were out with your friends and you had a great night. Do you remember every Saturday night at the age of 40 or 50 that you had in high school that you enjoyed? And if not, does that mean you shouldn't have gone and done it back then? Because if I had told you I'm from the future, you're going to forget this night when you're 40 years old, so don't bother, stay home and read a book, would you have stayed home? Of course not. Because life is about experiencing. And as I get older, people like me who get older realize that the moment becomes so much more precious than the future or the past.
Yeah, and we always say, they don't remember here, but they do remember here. They keep it. This is where their memories are now.
John is pointing to his heart, in case you're not watching.
Oh yes, for those of you listening.
Yeah.
And it's like it's also the dopamine that is released. Dopamine is it makes you feel good, and so what better medicine than to go in and sing a song with someone you love, or read something that they love, and tell them how much they're loved and make them laugh. Like, that was my joy. If I could make my mom laugh, I was, success,
And we haven't delved deeply into the approach I've been using, but those joyful moments and those engagements, regardless of memory, they fill the different domains of well-being that increase the reserve and resilience of people with dementia, so they don't get pushed to the point where they have crisis reactions. And so that really, my approach is all about, using 7 different aspects of well-being and working proactively, not reactively, to keep those glasses full, so that the person doesn't get to a point where these crises happen. And so it's not just joy, but it's autonomy, it's security, it's meaning, it's growth, it's identity, connectedness. These are all things that all human beings need, but we've never been taught how to proactively put these in care plans. And once we do that, we find that we not only, instead of just reacting and calming people in the moment, we actually prevent that distress from happening in the first place, because the root cause was not the brain disease, it was this lack of well-being. And the system, and this education system, that didn't teach people that that's still critically important, even if you live with a condition like dementia.
Can you just talk a lot about, besides locked doors and, like you just said, autonomy and well-being, like the segregation of people with dementia, and how does that work? What is that the cause of, and why do we do it?
I think a lot of it is stigma and fear. We fear dementia. People say it's more feared now than cancer. It's the number one feared condition for adults. And we don't understand people, and we don't want to look at it because it reminds us of what could be a potential future for ourselves. We are taught that these people, have behaviors that some people think that they can be dangerous because they have this condition, and so we kind of want to not have to engage with that in our daily lives. And some of the most stigmatizing people are older people. So you will see in retirement communities people saying, I don't want those people around. Even some people complain that there are too many walkers or too many wheelchairs in the dining room, because once again, ageism was defined years ago as a prejudice against our feared future selves.
Yes.
And I think that has a lot to do with this. And once again, it became a marketing ploy to tell people this is better care. And in our book, we will look at all the studies and show how it is not better care. And in many cases, it can lead to more harmful effects to separate people away from other people. So a lot of it is just misunderstandings, really, and that's where education is so critical.
Wow. So, and that really is the key, right? It's really the key is the education for people.
Absolutely.
Because stigma is such a big problem. I saw it in not only my family and my community, I saw it in the healthcare system, where just the misunderstanding and the stigma of somebody with dementia or any cognitive, issue, mild cognitive issue, even, the lack of patience, the lack of understanding, the lack of respect.
Yeah. I was speaking for the Alzheimer's Society up in Minnesota, doing an annual symposium. And after I gave my keynote, a woman came up to me in the audience, a community member, and she said, I've just been diagnosed as having mild cognitive impairment. Now, we know mild cognitive impairment, the majority of people do not progress or go back to normal in their testing in years down the road. It is not, a given that you're going to get Alzheimer's. But she was labeled as having mild cognitive impairment. She said her family was already saying, you can't do things anymore. We have to take over for you based on that number. And once again, when you look at people as a number and as a certain set of very reductionistic skills, then you don't understand the capabilities people have. The woman who can't tell you where she lives or the names of all her children, who can sit down and play the piano by ear and improvise as she does. I've seen people who can do that. So we're not viewing people properly, and therefore we're not giving them the opportunities that they need to live as well as possible, in spite of their diagnosis.
When you segregate people with it takes away all these other people who could be talking to them, who could be, who, in a different way than as
Well, it's
opposed to all these people
community.
just, who can't communicate with each other. Put them in places where they can communicate. You look at some of these countries where they're having college students literally moving into facilities and living there.
Yep.
As opposed to just saying, no, let's put all the old people over here and let's put all, the segregation makes no sense.
And the benefit is mutual, by the way.
Many people find older people who are retired who may feel like they're not being doing as much meaningful, purposeful work as they used to. They can have a caregiving role. They can actually help support other people that have other needs. And as you say, it's beneficial both ways. I've certainly gained so much from the people I've interacted with who have lived with the diagnosis. That it's about relationships, and it's about relationships being bidirectional and benefiting all parties. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And we breed that fear by segregation. We breed it, even with children. I remember bringing my friend's daughter, who was 3 years old, to visit with me. I was taking care of her for the day, and I brought her to visit my mom. I thought, that would be so nice for both of them. She was so petrified walking in that place. I could tell she had never seen older people. And my granddaughter, go on.
I've often said this, that segregating people with dementia is kind of like smoking. It's easier to not start than it is to stop once you start doing it. Because when you do have that locked separate area, you are telling the other people who live there, you're right, those people don't belong with you. And then when you try to open it up, you face the consequences of the hole you've dug for yourself by perpetuating that stigma. You're absolutely right.
100%. I mean, and I was going to say, and you've seen it because I included in the documentary with my 2-year-old granddaughter who only saw my mom on Zoom because it was during COVID when she was born. And when she finally got to see her, she wasn't afraid at all. And here's my mom with very high acuity at this point. She climbed into bed with her, laid her head on her, looked at her, laughed, made her laugh. They kissed each other, and she was like, nanny, 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 nanny. Not a fear in her. Not a fear. Yeah. And I think that's so healthy.
That's why intergenerational engagements are so important. There's at least one nursing home, I believe it's in Kansas, that actually has a kindergarten embedded in the home. They have a little sort of schoolhouse built, and they spend some of the time in there doing lessons and some of the time doing things with the people who live there. And they'll do morning calisthenics. They'll take the hands of somebody and they'll do calisthenics. And the physical therapists say that the kids get better range of motion from the elders there than they do in physical therapy sessions because they're working with kids and they're doing all this stuff.
I love that so much. That makes so much sense. That's stigma. So great.
Yeah, South Korea has been one place that has for many years been introducing connecting teenagers, in particular children, with older people, with people with dementia, with people in long-term care, to try to help them have better understanding, reduce stigmatization of the older generation.
I love that. Okay, I know we could talk for 17 hours. I want to talk about one thing that you touched on in your keynote, which was about the fact that we don't have, and this plays into community, we don't have enough people to care for professionals. Right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
After all the other arguments, we argue civil liberties. We argue it's not better care. We argue that it's a cause of distress. All these different things. We argue that it's a one size fits all. That isn't true of dementia. But one of the arguments that really is not so much philosophical as it is mathematical is the fact that we are aging globally. And in 1950, there were approximately 12 working adults for every retired adult in the world. And in 2000, that went down to 9 to 1. And in 2050, it's projected there will be 4 working adults for every retired adult. So we can't, it goes beyond dementia. It's really aging. We can't just keep building separate campuses for older people to live on because there will be no one to build and staff and maintain them. Because we still have lawyers and teachers and construction workers and firefighters and all the other people that we need in society. And filmmakers, producers.
Yeah, exactly.
So aging in community is the only solution. And even when you talk about the most beautiful places that you can think of for people with dementia, we can't just accommodate the increasing number of people with dementia by separate, gorgeous, even open, inclusive campuses. We have to find ways to keep people in their communities longer. There will always be some congregate living because not everybody can live in their own house or apartment until the day they die. But we got to do much better at it. And that's why the recent discussion that was raised in the political campaign about expanding Medicare to cover more home services.
Yeah.
These are important conversations because we do not have enough support for living at home. You know, if you got a lot of money, you can get care aides or nurses, or if you've just been in the hospital, you know, for a week or two. But beyond that, it's very difficult to get the support you need. And communities are not designed in America for aging. Yeah, ironically, some of the best communities are places like New York City, where you have a grocery store in the corner and you have public transport. When you live in a suburb and you can't even get a bottle of milk without hopping in your car, you're in trouble. And so we've got to really figure out how can we better create communities that embrace and support each other as we age. And part of that is the natural retirement communities, the village models, all the different things that are out there. There's no one size fits all. Once again, there's many different varieties, but we need to engage our politicians, our civic designers, our planners in our community in understanding better how we can accommodate ourselves as we age instead of just thinking about some other place we can move people to.
I think it's out. Yeah, I think it's the collective consciousness that we've created that it needs to shift. And like you said, you know, I think Ashton Applewhite says it too, who we have in our documentary, who's a real advocate for, you know, anti-ageism. Who said just what you said. It's really a bias against your future self. And that is a disservice for all of us. And it really does, it is going to take the community to take care of each other and get back to what's important. We're so individualized. We've individualized ourselves into oblivion, basically. And
one thing I've said, being a baby boomer, is that I think baby boomers have the power to transform this. But first, baby boomers have to admit they're aging, and then once they do, hopefully they'll change things. But we're kind of a tough generation.
Well, I mean, then let's talk to all the millennials and Gen Zs out there who also are, you know, it's going to affect everybody. So
we'll get there.
It's going to get there. So, well, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? We're going to have Al back with his partners.
Oh, yes. Jennifer and Pat and I will come back and we'll talk about the book more specifically as we go along, and we'll definitely do that. I mean, we could talk forever. It's such a delight, Susie and Don. It's just spending time with you because we hit on so many important points and you ask so many critical questions that too few people are asking in politics or in society. And so it's great to have a forum to do this. And I'm really looking forward to No Country for Old People and hoping that will also spark discussion and get people up and talking, because that's what good filmmaking does. It makes people think. It makes people discuss.
That's all we
need.
Makes
people connect.
Yeah, just shift.
Talk, think, and act. Yeah, and
yes,
act.
Yeah. Well, we love you. I mean, we love you so much, and we are so grateful to have you on our show. And you know, of course, you're going to be back, and we're going to continue the conversation because
I will keep bugging you.
There's so much more. Yeah, there's so much more to talk about. But you know, do look up Al, all of his wonderful work that's out there. I mean, when I was first doing the documentary, you came so highly recommended from everyone that I talked to, and
thank you.
And so, you know, but who knew you were such a cool guy, a cool dude, and you know, a musician, and we love that. You know, I'm all about the music, and you know, all the information, how to reach out, how to get all of his books, and watch his keynotes. Watch his keynote; it's so good. And then we'll be in the show notes. So.
Super.
A lot of love here. A love fest, and that's why, you know,
we're going to continue this love fest even after we hang up, because one reason for that is that love is powerful, love is contagious, and love conquers all. We do thank you for watching or listening or wherever you saw us today. And if you like what you saw, please subscribe and share and all those fun things. And we're going to see you next time. And have a great one.
Bye, everybody. Love you. Take care. Be good. Be fun. And, you know, do some risky things.
Yeah. Go
not?
out there. Do it. Bye-bye.
I'm Angela Fairhurst, founder of Jerry Gadgets, a revolutionary solution for dementia care. Inspired by my personal journey caring for my mother with dementia, I developed patented sensory tools that engage loved ones, reduce anxiety, and create joyful moments without medication, providing much-needed relief for caregivers. Jerry Gadgets currently come in 3 silicone buckets with activities like flower arranging, shape sorting, and tactile fidgets, with more in development. Each Jerry Gadget is designed to stimulate the senses, fostering connection and communication, even at advanced stages of cognitive decline. Non-toxic, built to last, and dishwasher safe, Jerry Gadgets transform caregiving by promoting engagement, improving quality of life, and offering caregivers a respite from constant supervision. Discover how our innovative products can bring joy and meaningful interaction to your loved ones with dementia while easing the caregiver's burden. Visit jerrygadgets.com to learn more and start making every moment count.
For a limited time, you can get 20% off your next order of Jerry Gadgets by going to www.ssww.com, Jerry Gadgets for Dementia.